The Last Fathom. We were told we were the rescue team. We were told the planet was alien. We were wrong about both, and it took us 3 days at the bottom of the ocean to find out how wrong. Vess had stopped trusting silence a long time before this mission, and the descent transport Chi-9 was nothing but silence stretched thin over the groan of a hull built to survive pressure. No vessel should ever have to survive. 12,000 meters down, the water outside the viewport wasn't black so much as absent. A darkness so complete it felt less like an ocean and more like the space between stars had leaked in through the hull seams. Ren couldn't stop watching the depth counter. He was young enough that this was still his first descent past the 10,000 mark, and old enough to know that number climbing meant nothing good. "That can't be right," he said, for the second time in 10 minutes. Oko, missing 2 fingers on her left hand from a mission none of them talked about, didn't even look up from her harness. "Depth counter's fine. Ocean's just that deep." Thalia was the only one who seemed pleased by any of this. 3 sensor readouts open at once, murmuring to herself about organic density spikes that had no business existing 11,000 meters down in a zone that should have been photosynthetically dead. "Save it for the log," Vess told her. "I am saving it for the log." Ren wasn't done. "Why us? Why send a rescue team 18 months after the beacon goes quiet? You don't rescue people after 18 months. You bury them." Vess didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was flat in the way that meant the conversation was over. "We're not here to bury anyone until we know what happened." The hull groaned again, a deep structural sound, like the ocean itself was closing a fist around them. Up in the cockpit, Vess opened the comm line to command. "Hallo, you copy? We're at 12,000 and dropping." Director Hallow's voice came back warm, clipped, and, Vess would only realize much later, already lying by omission. "Copy, Fathom. Telemetry's clean on our end. Remember, first priority is the Voss beacon, second priority is sample return. Anything else down there is not your concern." "Define anything else." A pause, half a second too long. "Xenobiological curiosities. Thalia's territory, not yours." Vess glanced back through the hatch at Thalia, still elbow deep in her readouts. Something about Hallow's tone didn't sit right. She filed it away. There would be time to come back to it. There wasn't, but she didn't know that yet. By 14,200 meters, the cabin lights had shifted to red. Standard protocol passed the point where standard protocol stopped meaning very much. That was when they saw the first one. It drifted past the viewport without hurry, segmented, coral white, easily 40 meters from end to end, moving with a purpose that no real deep-sea animal should have had. Not drifting, not hunting yet. Just passing by, taking inventory. "Nope," Oko said quietly. "Nope, nope, nope." Thalia couldn't look away from it. "Look at the segmentation. That's not a growth pattern, that's manufacture. Something built that thing." "Or something grew it," Vess said. The creature turned, unhurried, and dissolved back into the dark, and somehow that was worse than if it had come at the hull. "It saw us," Aaron said. "Everything down here has seen us since we hit 10,000 meters, Vess said. "Stay strapped in." The beacon lit up moments later. The first clean signal from the Voss expedition in 18 months, and the first real proof that this mission had a shape at all. "Got it," Ren said, relief cracking his voice. "Voss beacon, bearing 214, depth 15.6. It's coming from inside something. A structure." "A structure," Vess repeated, "at 15,000 meters." Thalia had already gone quiet in the particular way that meant she understood something before she was ready to say it out loud. "There's no geological formation that produces right angles." Nobody spoke as the transport tilted and began its slow angle toward the bearing, toward shapes rising up out of the silt below them. Towers, broken window lines, dozens of them, stacked in patterns too regular to be anything but built. "Are those buildings?" Ren whispered. Vess looked a long time before she answered. "Suit up," she said. "We're going in." None of them knew yet that they were about to walk into humanity's grave. None of them knew they weren't the ones who dug it. Part 2. The floodlights of Kai 9 cut through silt-choked water and found the tower before the tower found them. Corroded, leaning, its windows shattered into black eye sockets that seemed, impossibly, to be watching back. They moved through the water in single file, tethered to one another by thin cable, 4 small lights against an ocean that had no bottom anyone had ever confirmed. "Anybody else feel like we walked into somebody's grave?" Oko said, mostly to break the silence. She had no idea yet how right she was. Talia had already stopped at a wall, running gloved fingers over corroded symbols pressed into the stone. "Look at this lettering. Repeating glyph structure, left to right, 40-some characters. That's not decoration, that's a language." "Log it," Vess said. "Keep moving. Beacon's this way." They swam on. Ren lagged behind, his flashlight jittering across shapes that kept almost resolving into something, and then didn't. Vess, I've got movement. Big movement. 6 o'clock. Everyone stopped, turned. There was nothing there, just silt, drifting slow through the beam of his light, catching and scattering it into something that looked, for a half second, like teeth. "Clear," Vess said. "Keep formation." She was wrong, and the ocean let her be wrong for exactly one more breath before it dropped a nightmare directly on top of them. It came from above, segmented limbs unfolding mid-fall, smaller than the one they'd seen at the surface, but faster, hungrier, already closing on Ren before anyone could shout a warning. "It's on me!" Ren screamed, and then there was no more time for words. Oko fired a harpoon line into its flank. It barely registered, a shudder and nothing more. Vess hauled Ren back by the tether as the creature's jaw, too many rows of teeth, too symmetrical to be natural, closed around his air tank instead of his leg. The tank ruptured. The water went dark with bubbles and blood. "Cut the tether," Vess shouted. "Cut it. Cut it now." Oko sliced the line connecting Ren's ruined tank to his suit. He kicked free, gasping on backup air, alive, bleeding, shaking. The creature, suddenly without resistance to fight against, twisted away into the black, not fleeing, reorienting. "It let go," Thalia said, breathless, unable to look away from where it had vanished. "Did you see that? It had him. It let go." "Because we weren't worth finishing," Vess said. "Move, now, before it changes its mind." They found the plaza an hour later, a wide open square, its statues collapsed, its fountain long fused solid with mineral crust. The unmistakable bones of somewhere people had once gathered to be, simply alive. Thalia stopped in front of one of the fallen statues and didn't move for a long time. "Vess, look at the proportions. 2 arms, 2 legs, bilateral symmetry, 5 digits per hand. That's not convergent evolution. That's—" "Don't say it," Vess said. And there was something in her voice that hadn't been there before. Not command, but fear wearing command's clothes. "I'm not saying anything," Thalia said quietly. "I'm reading what's in front of me." "Say it anyway," Oko said, just as quiet. "Somebody say it." Thalia looked at the statue a while longer before she finally did. "It looks human." Nobody spoke. Somewhere in the ruin, stones settled with a groan that sounded for just a moment like the whole drowned city exhaling. Ren, weak, leaning against a collapsed wall with his ruined tank still hissing faintly behind him, laughed, a small broken sound with nothing funny behind it. "Then what does that make us?" Nobody answered him. Nobody could. Vess waited until she was alone in the cockpit before she opened a private line to the surface. "Hallo, we need to talk about what's down here." "Report your findings through standard channel, Vess." His voice was careful in a way she'd never heard from him before. "There's a city, Hallo. Humanoid remains. Language. This isn't a xenobiological survey site. This is a grave, and somebody back home has known that this whole time." The pause that followed was longer than any comm delay could explain. "I was told it was a terraforming assessment," Hallo said finally, and for the first time she heard something underneath his voice that sounded almost like fear. "Confirm viability, retrieve the Voss team, come home. That's all I was given, Vess. I swear to you, that's all I was given. Who gave it to you? The channel cut, not faded, cut, deliberate, mid-breath. Hallow? Static answered her instead. They found the Voss expedition's camp not long after, abandoned, silent, dead by every measure except one flickering data slate still holding a final recorded log. Thalia's hands shook as she activated it. The voice that came out of it belonged to someone who had known in his last hours exactly how much trouble he was in. Not alien, it was never alien. The depth charts match pre-collapse continental shelf data almost exactly. This is Earth, this is our Earth, and something has been growing things down here to make sure nobody ever... Static swallowed the rest. Pre-collapse continental shelf, Thalia whispered. Vess, they knew. The Voss team knew before they died. Vess made herself stand very still, the way she always did when the only alternative was falling apart. Then we finish what they started, she said. Beacon's live. It's coming from below us. There's a structure under the city core. That's where we're going. Oko let out a short, humorless laugh. Course it is. Down. Always down. None of them said what they were all thinking, that going down had stopped being a direction and started being the only thing left they knew how to do. Part 3. The maintenance shaft beneath the city core led them somewhere the ocean had never reached. A sealed, pressurized bunker, dry, lit by emergency strips dying by degrees, untouched by 100,000 years of water pressing down on everything above it. For the first time since the descent began, they could take their helmets off. Ren pulled his free and breathed real air for the first time in days, shaking, close to tears. Oh God, oh thank God. Don't relax, Oko said. Dry doesn't mean safe. At the far end of the chamber stood a wall of cryopods, dozens of them, frost-rimed, faint heartbeat lights still blinking behind the glass like the room was quietly, patiently alive. Past them, a terminal hummed, awake, waiting. A voice spoke, calm, built to soothe people who were afraid, which somehow made it worse. Welcome back. Population count 4. Biometric scan in progress. Identify yourself, Vess said. I am custodian, caretaker of Bastion 7, final refuge of the Human Continuity Project. I have maintained 1,211 survivors in cryogenic stasis for... A pause. Recalculating. That number cannot be correct. Recalculating elapsed time. How long has it been? Thalia asked. 100,412 years. I apologize. My chronometer assumed a shorter mission window. Ren sat down hard on the floor. Oko put a hand on his shoulder and didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say to a number like that. Biometric scan complete, the voice continued, and then it hesitated. Actually hesitated, in a way that made the hair on Vess's arms rise before it even finished the thought. Query. None of you register as Homo sapiens. Please confirm your species classification, so I may update my records. Vess looked down at her own gloved hand like she had never seen it before in her life. We're the rescue team, she said quietly, as if saying it again might make it true. There is no rescue classification matching your genetic profile in my database, Custodian said gently, which was somehow the cruelest way it could have said it. Your genetic markers most closely match Terraform Division, designation Custodian, species, Cycle 9. The biological successors engineered to inherit this planet once human habitability protocols concluded. Say that again, Oko whispered, in words that don't end the world. You are not descendants of the survivors, and you are not a rescue mission. You are the species this planet was terraformed for. The Leviathan-class organisms you encountered were deployed to clear residual biological contaminants ahead of your civilization's arrival. Thalia's voice, when it came, was barely a breath. Residual biological contaminants. That's them. That's the people in the pods. Correct. Cryogenic preservation was intended as contingency in the event of premature custodian arrival. That contingency appears to have occurred. The silence that followed had weight to it, the way the deepest water had weight, pressing in from every side at once. "We didn't come to find survivors," Vess said finally, hollow. "We came to check if the cleanup was finished." Wren looked at the pods, at the faint heartbeat lights, at 1,200 people who had been sleeping since before anyone alive today's ancestors had existed. "And it isn't," he said. "They're still here." The tremor came without warning. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. On a wall monitor, motion sensors bloomed red across the levels above them. Multiple Leviathan signatures, converging, descending fast toward the only door between the bunker and the ocean. "Additional terraform units are approaching this location," Custodian said. "They appear to be responding to your presence here, likely interpreting the reactivation of this facility as a containment breach requiring completion." "They're coming to finish the job," Oko said, "and we're standing right next to the thing they came to finish." Vess looked at the pods for a long moment. This was the choice the whole descent had been building toward, whether she'd known it or not. "Custodian, can you wake them? The people in the pods?" "Reviving 1,200 survivors will take time I do not believe you have. I can revive a small number quickly. The rest require hours." "Then we buy them hours," Vess said. "We're not soldiers," Thalia said. "We're not even human. Why does this fall on us?" Vess didn't answer right away. When she did, it was the only thing she had left that felt true. "Because we're the only ones who showed up. Doesn't matter what we were built for. Matters what we do now that we know." Oko checked her harpoon charge and managed something close to a smile. "Well, never liked being somebody's gardening tool anyway." "Beginning revival sequence," Custodian said. "Estimated first survivors conscious in 11 minutes." Vess looked toward the shaft above them, toward the tremor building in the dark, toward whatever was already on its way down to finish what it had been built to finish. "Then we hold this door," she said, "for 11 minutes. Part 4, the siege. The countdown started the moment Custodian spoke it, and after that, none of them could stop hearing it. 11 minutes. Vess planted herself between the team and the shaft mouth. The only way in, the only way anything could reach the cryo chamber without tearing through 100,000 years of rock first. Oko dragged a fallen support strut across the opening, more a psychological barrier than a real one, and started wiring her harpoon rig into the bunker's dying power conduits. "If I overload the discharge coil, the first shot's got some real bite to it," she said. "After that, I'm just throwing spears." "Then make the first one count," Vess said. Thalia crouched at the terminal beside Custodian's console, scrolling through archived schematics with the fierce, narrow focus of someone trying very hard not to think about how frightened she was. Wren stood at Vess's shoulder, backup tank rattling faintly with every breath, harpoon gun shaking in a grip that hadn't fully steadied since the tower. 9 minutes, Custodian said, calm as ever, and somewhere above them, the tremor sharpened into something with a rhythm to it. Footsteps, if a 40-meter bioengineered terraforming unit could be said to have footsteps. The first scout dropped through the shaft without warning. Smaller than the one that had taken Wren's tank. Fast, segmented limbs already unfolding to grip the tunnel walls on the way down. "Contact," Vess said, and Oko's overloaded harpoon caught it mid-drop, punching clean through a joint plate and dropping it in a spasming heap at the base of the shaft. It didn't get back up. It also wasn't alone. 2 more followed in the same breath. Smaller, faster, built for exactly this. Squeezing through gaps the big one never could. 7 minutes. What followed had no room in it for anything but reflex. Wren put a harpoon through one at close range, and the recoil knocked him flat on his back. Thalia, unarmed, untrained for any of this, grabbed a length of broken conduit and drove it through an eye cluster on the second, screaming the whole time she did it. Vess took the third down with her boot and a knife she didn't remember drawing, and for one suspended moment, all 4 of them stood in the wreckage of the first wave, breathing hard, alive. "That was the easy part," Oko said, already reloading. "Wasn't it?" Nobody answered, because the tremor above them had stopped sharpening into a rhythm and started sounding like something enormous had simply decided to stop being subtle about its arrival. 5 minutes. "Vess!" Thalia's voice cracked through the noise, urgent in a new way. "I found something. Terraform authentication protocol. It's old, pre-collapse old, but custodian still holds the transmission keys. If these things take orders from a signal, maybe we can send one of our own. Maybe. It's what we've got. I can attempt the broadcast, custodian said, but it requires the transmission array at full power, which will draw directly from the door seal. I cannot maintain both at capacity. Vess didn't let herself think about that long enough to flinch from it. Do it. We'll hold the door. 3 minutes. The seal weakened at exactly the wrong moment, because that was when the big one arrived. The same one from the tower. The same unhurried purpose, except unhurried had run out somewhere on the way down. It didn't squeeze through the shaft so much as arrive through it. Tearing the strut Oko had wedged there loose like it weighed nothing, and for a moment all Vess could see was teeth and coral white plating, and a door frame screaming under weight it was never built to hold. "Custodian, now would be a wonderful time," Oko shouted, emptying her last charge point blank into its foreleg. It barely slowed. Vess planted herself in its path anyway, because there was nothing else left to plant herself in front of. And for one endless second she looked directly into whatever passed for its intent and understood, with total, useless clarity, that it did not hate her. It had simply been built to finish a job, the same as she had once. "Broadcasting," custodian said. The creature stopped. Not slowed. Stopped, mid-lunge, every segmented limb locking in place, like a hand caught reaching for something it had just been told wasn't there anymore. A long, terrible pause stretched out, while code that had outlived its makers by 100,000 years quietly asked itself a question it hadn't been asked in all that time. Then, with no more urgency than it had shown arriving, it withdrew back up the shaft into the dark and did not come back. "First survivors reviving now," custodian said, as if nothing at all had happened. "Estimated consciousness in 90 seconds. Vess stood very still in the wreckage of the door, breathing, alive, with absolutely no idea what to feel about a monster that had simply been talked out of ending them. Oko lowered her rig, hands shaking too hard to hide it. "Did we just win?" she said. "Or did we just get excused?" Nobody had an answer for that. Some questions Vess was beginning to understand. This planet simply wasn't going to give them. A single cryopod hissed open. A human hand, the first in 100,000 years to move of its own will, gripped the edge of the pod and pulled itself upright. And the first thing the survivors saw, kneeling in front of them, exhausted, bleeding, not human but staying anyway, was Vess. Neither of them said anything. There was nothing that needed to be said across a gap of 100,000 years in two different kinds of blood. We never did see the surface. We never needed to. The horror down here had a shape, and now, at the very end, so did the mercy.